Agent Maya Washington sits handcuffed in a police cruiser, blood on her cheek, uniform torn. Watching Officer Richard Keller laughing with colleagues, waving her FBI credentials mockingly. Her phone rings in Keller's hand. FBI Director flashes on screen. Keller's smile vanishes. Before we dive into this shocking story of injustice and redemption, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you believe everyone deserves equal treatment under the law. Now, let's see how karma comes for those who abuse their power. Maya Washington drove along the deserted county road just outside Oakridge, Virginia, her eyelids heavy with exhaustion. After weeks of undercover work infiltrating the notorious East Side drug ring, she was finally heading home. The clock on her dashboard read 2:15 in the morning. And all Maya could think about was the testimony she needed to prepare for next week's grand jury. Her FBI-issued sedan hummed quietly beneath her. The only vehicle on this stretch of rural highway until flashing red and blue lights suddenly illuminated her rearview mirror. She pulled over methodically, following protocol as she'd done countless times before. The unmarked police car stopped behind her, its headlights nearly blinding in the mirror. Maya reached for her credentials, prepared for the routine interaction. Officer Richard Keller approached her window with a flashlight aimed directly at her face, his expression hardening the moment he saw her. "License and registration," he demanded without preamble. His tone carried immediate hostility. Maya kept her hands visible on the steering wheel. "Good evening, officer. My name is Special Agent Maya Washington with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'm reaching for my credentials now." She moved slowly, deliberately. Keller's flashlight beam never wavered from her face. "What's a woman like you doing in this neighborhood at this hour?" he asked, emphasis on you, leaving little doubt about his meaning. Maya remained professional despite the microaggression. "I'm heading home after work, sir." She handed over her FBI credentials and badge. Keller examined them with exaggerated scrutiny, his lips curling into a sneer. "FBI? Right. And I'm the Attorney General." His disbelief was palpable. "These look fake to me." "Step out of the vehicle." Maya's training kicked in. "Stay calm. De-escalate. Document everything. Officer, those credentials are legitimate. You can verify them by calling the number on the back." Keller's face flushed with anger. "I said get out of the car now. You're under arrest for impersonating a federal officer." Before Maya could respond, Keller flung open her door, grabbed her arm, and violently yanked her from the vehicle. The sudden movement sent pain shooting through her shoulder as he slammed her against the side of her car. "I don't know what game you're playing," Keller hissed, his breath hot against her ear, "but nobody comes into my town pretending to be something they're not." Another patrol car pulled up, and a younger officer stepped out, approaching cautiously. "Everything okay here, Keller?" Officer Brendan Miller asked, his gaze shifting between his colleague and Maya. "Got ourselves an impersonator," Keller announced triumphantly. "Claims she's FBI." Maya noticed Miller's hesitation, the slight furrow of his brow. She filed that observation away, a potential ally. As Keller roughly handcuffed her, Maya spoke directly to Miller. "My credentials are legitimate. This is a mistake." Miller glanced at the FBI badge lying on the hood of Maya's car but said nothing. Keller ordered Miller to watch Maya while he searched her vehicle. Minutes later, Keller emerged holding a small plastic bag. Well, look what we have here." He dangled the bag of white powder before Maya's eyes. "Impersonating a federal officer in possession. That's serious time." Maya's blood ran cold. "That's not mine. You planted that." Keller's smile widened. "Search is documented on my body cam, ma'am." Maya noticed he'd only turned on the camera after finding the planted evidence. Keller began reciting Miranda rights, deliberately mixing up the words. "You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one, too bad. Anything you say can be twisted and used against you." Maya's mind flashed back to her FBI training about police cooperation. The instructors had emphasized mutual respect between agencies, the shared mission of justice. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Officer, I'm currently working an undercover operation targeting the East Side Drug Organization. You're interfering with a federal investigation," Maya explained, keeping her voice steady despite the rising panic. Keller leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Listen here, you uppity bitch. I don't care who you claim to be. In this county, I'm the law. I can make people disappear, especially ones who don't know their place." The racial slur that followed made Miller visibly uncomfortable. Maya was placed in the back of Keller's patrol car, her mind racing through options. She knew emergency protocols. The FBI would start looking for her when she missed check-in. But that wasn't for another 12 hours. As the car pulled away, Maya studied her surroundings, memorizing street names and landmarks. She wasn't just a victim. She was a federal agent with years of training. And Officer Richard Keller had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The Oakridge Police Station came into view. A squat brick building with American flags flanking the entrance. Maya had driven past it many times during her undercover operation but had never been inside. Now, she observed it with her trained FBI eye, security cameras positioned at the main entrance, but notably absent at the side door, 2 dispatchers visible through the front window. A keypad entry system for the secured areas. She committed every detail to memory as Keller roughly escorted her inside, his fingers digging painfully into her arm. The fluorescent lights of the station cast harsh shadows across the faces of the night shift officers, most of whom looked up with mild curiosity as Keller paraded Maya through the bullpen. "Got a live one tonight," Keller announced proudly, impersonating a federal officer in narcotics possession. The desk sergeant, an older man with a nameplate reading, Johnson, barely glanced up from his paperwork. "Booking rooms open," he muttered, showing mild concern at Maya's disheveled appearance, but clearly unwilling to question Keller's authority. Maya catalogued every face, every name badge. Johnson, Rivera, Diaz, Peterson. The layout of the station. The location of exit doors. The security camera blind spots. Her fingerprinting and processing proceeded with Keller looming over her. Maya knew the fingerprint system should immediately flag her FBI status in the national database. But Keller seemed to be bypassing standard protocols, entering her information manually. "I need to make my phone call," Maya stated firmly after the booking was complete. Keller laughed. "Maybe tomorrow. If I remember." Another violation of her rights, another detail for the inevitable investigation. As Maya was led to the holding cells, she passed through a corridor where 3 other detainees waited on benches. All were people of color. One young Latino man had a bloody tissue pressed to his nose. An elderly black woman in church clothes looked utterly bewildered by her surroundings. Maya made eye contact with each of them, a silent acknowledgement of the shared injustice. The elderly woman's eyes widened slightly. "You're that FBI lady," she whispered as Maya passed. "From the community meeting last spring. You talked about youth programs." Maya gave a nearly imperceptible nod before Keller roughly pushed her forward. "Keep moving." Keller had noticed the interaction and immediately separated them, placing Maya in a solitary holding cell at the end of the corridor, far from the other detainees. The potential witness had been identified and isolated, another procedural mistake that Maya filed away. Maya sat on the metal bench, keeping her expression neutral despite the storm of thoughts inside her head. 30 minutes later, an older man in a police captain's uniform approached her cell. The nameplate on his chest read Ellis. Maya felt a flicker of hope. Surely a higher-ranking officer would recognize the severity of Keller's actions. "Captain Ellis," she began. "I'm Special Agent Maya Washington with the FBI. Officer Keller has arrested me without cause, planted evidence in my vehicle, and denied me my constitutional rights. Ellis's expression remained impassive. Keller appeared behind him, gesturing for the captain to step aside. The two men moved several feet away, but Maya could still hear fragments of their conversation. Dangerous, resistant during arrest, claiming FBI status, needs to be taught respect. Ellis cast a dubious glance toward Maya. Then back to Keller. You're sure about this, Richard? Seems like a lot of trouble if she's actually who she says. Keller lowered his voice further. But Maya caught the words, trust me, and handled before. After a moment of hesitation, Ellis nodded. Keep her overnight for processing. No calls until morning shift. As Ellis walked away, Maya closed her eyes briefly, disappointment washing over her. The corruption ran deeper than just Keller. Her mind drifted back to her childhood in Baltimore. To the first time she'd experienced racism at 8 years old when a store owner had followed her through the aisles, assuming she would steal something. To the high school guidance counselor who'd suggested cosmetology school despite her perfect GPA and ambitions for law enforcement. To the day she decided to join the FBI. Determined to change the system from within. Maya's reflections were interrupted by the soft sound of footsteps. Officer Miller appeared at her cell, glancing nervously over his shoulder before sliding a paper cup of water through the bars. I'm sorry about this, he whispered, so quietly she barely heard him. Keller's got a reputation. Nobody stands up to him. Maya took the water, studying Miller's face. Young, early 20s. Conscience still intact. Officer Miller, she murmured, matching his volume. What's happening here is illegal. You know that, right? Miller's eyes darted to the floor. I just started here 3 months ago. I can't, you can, Maya interrupted gently. You're witnessing civil rights violations against a federal officer. That makes you a potential accomplice or a potential witness for the prosecution. Your choice. She saw the conflict play across his features before he backed away without another word. Maya sipped the water slowly, her mind mapping the station's layout, identifying vulnerabilities. The cameras she'd spotted had blind spots near the evidence room. The night shift was clearly understaffed. And in Officer Miller, she'd found the weak link in Keller's chain of command. She settled onto the hard bench, calculating. They'd made a critical error in underestimating her. Before this was over, Officer Richard Keller would learn exactly what that mistake would cost him. Brendan Miller sat in his patrol car, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. The woman in the holding cell, Agent Washington, her words echoed in his mind, potential accomplice or potential witness. He joined the Oakridge Police Department with dreams of making a difference, of protecting and serving his community. But during his short 3 months on the force, those ideals had gradually eroded under the influence of officers like Richard Keller. He'd seen the pattern of racial profiling, the unnecessary roughness during arrests in certain neighborhoods, the evidence that occasionally disappeared or appeared where it hadn't been before. He told himself he was imagining things, that he needed more experience to understand the complexities of real police work. But Agent Washington's eyes, calm, intelligent, and utterly certain, had stripped away his last excuses. With a deep breath, Miller logged into the patrol car's computer terminal. He entered Maya Washington's name into the National Law Enforcement Database, a search that Keller had suspiciously bypassed. The results appeared almost instantly. Special Agent Maya Washington, FBI, 15 years of service, decorated counter-narcotics specialist, current assignment classified. Multiple commendations. No disciplinary actions. Legitimate credentials. Miller's stomach twisted. He pulled out his personal cell phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in months. Hello? The gruff voice on the other end was heavy with sleep. Sergeant Washington? It's Brendan Miller. I'm sorry for calling so late, but I need your help. Retired Sergeant James Washington had been Miller's mentor at the academy, one of the few black officers who'd risen through the ranks in a neighboring county before retiring 2 years ago. No relation to Maya, but perhaps he'd know of her. Miller? It's 3 in the morning, son. What's happened? There's an FBI agent in our holding cells. Keller arrested her. But I think he's framing her. I checked her credentials, she's the real deal. A long pause followed. Maya Washington? Sergeant Washington asked finally. Miller's pulse quickened. Yes. You know her? Know of her. Got quite a reputation in federal law enforcement. Took down the Marquez cartel last year. Word is she's brilliant, by the book. The sergeant's voice turned grave. If Keller's falsified charges against a federal agent, you're all looking at serious prison time. You understand that, right? Miller nodded, then realized the gesture couldn't be seen. Yes, sir. But Keller's protected here. Captain Ellis, the chief, they all look the other way. Not when the FBI gets involved, they won't, Sergeant Washington replied. This goes beyond local politics. You need to document everything. After ending the call, Miller returned to the station with renewed purpose. He used his phone to discreetly photograph the booking documents showing the irregularities in Maya's processing. He downloaded a voice recording app and concealed the phone in his breast pocket. Evidence. He would need evidence. During his midnight patrol, Miller accessed the records room under the pretense of filing reports. He looked up Keller's arrest history, finding a disturbing pattern. Over 80% of his arrests involved minorities, despite Oakridge's predominantly white population. Excessive force complaints had been filed 7 times in the past year alone, all mysteriously dismissed without investigation. Back in the patrol car, Miller contacted the courthouse clerk he'd been dating, Sophia Rodriguez. Brendan, do you know what time it is? She answered groggily. Sophia, I need information on cases Keller has brought in. Specifically, how many resulted in convictions versus dismissals once they reached the prosecutor's office. That's confidential information, she hesitated. Why? Because I think he's been falsifying evidence, and right now there's an innocent FBI agent in our holding cell because of it. Sophia's voice sharpened. Wait, seriously? Let me check our database. 20 minutes later, she called back. Brendan. Nearly 40% of Keller's arrests get quietly dismissed by the DA for insufficient evidence or procedural problems. That's more than triple the department average. The pattern was clear. Miller returned to the station, his recorder running. In the break room, he overheard Keller and Officers Reynolds and Diaz discussing Maya. The evidence from her car needs to disappear. Keller was saying. The bag I found has my prints all over it. What about her credentials? Reynolds asked. Those are definitely real, Rich. I checked the security features. By tomorrow they'll be misplaced, Keller replied confidently. She's just another perp claiming special treatment. The Brotherhood takes care of its own, right? Miller recognized the phrase, the Brotherhood, the unofficial network of officers who protected each other, regardless of misconduct. He'd been invited to their meetings but had made excuses to avoid attending. Now he understood why. Taking an enormous risk, Miller checked Maya's personal effects inventory and found her phone. He noted the emergency contact labeled simply, Director. Before he could lose his nerve, he sent a text message, Agent Washington in custody at Oakridge PD. Officer Keller falsified charges. Credentials confiscated. Situation urgent. The response was immediate, identity confirmed. Extraction team mobilizing. ETA 4 hours. Keep her safe. Bureau grateful. 4 hours. Miller had to keep Maya safe for 4 hours. He slipped back to her cell when the corridor was momentarily empty. Agent Washington, he whispered. I've contacted your emergency number. Help is coming, but not for several hours. Maya's eyes showed no surprise, only sharp calculation. Officer Miller, there's something else you need to know. My confidential informant on the East Side case, Anthony Mercer, might be in danger if Keller is connected to local drug operations. The code phrase is Blue Sparrow. If you can get word to him to go dark, it could save his life. Miller nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. As he turned to leave, Maya added, "And Miller? When this is over, you'll have a choice to make about what kind of officer you want to be." Her words stayed with him as he returned to his patrol duties, the weight of his decision growing heavier by the minute. Do you believe Officer Miller is doing the right thing by helping Agent Washington, or should he remain loyal to his department? Comment number 1 if you think Miller should continue helping Maya. Or number 2 if you think he's betraying his fellow officers. Like and subscribe if you believe standing up for what's right is more important than blind loyalty. What would you do if you discovered corruption in your workplace? And what do you think will happen when Keller discovers Miller's betrayal? Let's find out in the next part of this shocking story. Maya's body ached from the hard metal bench that had been her bed for the past 4 hours. The fluorescent lights never dimmed in the holding area. A deliberate tactic to disorient detainees. She'd been carefully tracking the officers' rotation patterns, noting that the surveillance camera in her corridor had a 6-second pan delay, a small but potentially crucial flaw. Through the small window in her cell, she could see the sky beginning to lighten. Morning shift would arrive soon, changing the dynamics of the station. Her window of opportunity was narrowing. Maya's trained ears picked up fragments of conversation from the dispatch area. Keller's voice carried down the corridor, "County transport at 9. Tell them special handling required." Another voice, presumably the dispatcher, "Reason for special handling?" Keller's response sent ice through her veins, "High flight risk. Isolation cell at County. The one where the cameras malfunction." Maya understood the implication immediately. County facilities were notorious for accidents, detainees who suffered unexplained injuries or worse in areas conveniently hidden from surveillance. She needed to act before that transport arrived. Maya slipped off her suit jacket and examined the lining where she concealed one of her FBI emergency tools, a flexible plastic strip that could manipulate simple locking mechanisms. Standard training for field agents in case of kidnapping or unlawful detention. She never imagined using it against law enforcement. Working silently, she manipulated the cell door lock. Feeling for the tumblers. A soft click rewarded her efforts, but she left the door appearing closed. Timing would be everything. Officer Miller appeared at the end of the corridor, pushing a cart of breakfast trays. As he approached her cell, Maya noticed his slightly widened eyes, a signal. "Breakfast," he announced loudly, then whispered, "Emergency in 5 minutes. East exit." Maya gave an imperceptible nod. Miller continued down the corridor, distributing trays to the other cells. Exactly 5 minutes later, the station's alarm system blared to life. "All units! Armed robbery in progress at First National Bank." The dispatcher's voice echoed through the station. Maya heard the commotion of officers responding, grabbing equipment, rushing toward exits. She counted to 30, then pushed her cell door open and moved swiftly through the now empty corridor. She had perhaps 2 minutes before someone realized the bank alarm coincided too conveniently with shift change. The evidence room was her first target. She needed her credentials and phone. The door required keycard access, but the ventilation grate above it did not. Using a nearby chair, Maya hoisted herself up and removed the grate. Thankful for the FBI's rigorous physical training requirements, she slipped through the narrow opening and dropped silently into the evidence room. Locating her personal effects took precious seconds, but soon her credentials and phone were secured. As she prepared to leave through the door, she heard footsteps approaching. Officer Reynolds, Keller's loyal partner. Maya pressed herself against the wall beside the door, controlling her breathing. The footsteps paused outside. "Weird," Reynolds muttered. "Could have sworn I saw movement in here." Maya remained perfectly still as Reynolds continued past the door. Once the footsteps faded, she slipped out and headed toward the east exit. The station's air duct system provided cover when another officer unexpectedly entered the corridor. Wedged in the narrow metal confines, Maya overheard a conversation that confirmed her worst suspicions. Keller says the FBI bitch is connected to the East Side investigation, a voice she recognized as Captain Ellis's said. If she knows about our arrangement with Dominguez, we've got serious problems. Another voice responded, the transport to county will take care of it. Accidents happen. Maya's mind raced. Keller wasn't just a racist cop with a vendetta. He was connected to the very drug organization she'd been investigating. Had her cover been blown? Was there a mole in the operation who had tipped off Keller about her real identity? The pieces were falling into place. As the officers moved away, Maya continued toward the east exit where Miller had indicated. The door was propped open slightly with a folded piece of paper. Miller's doing. She slipped through into the parking lot just as the shift change was completing. Miller stood beside a patrol car, pretending to check something on his clipboard. Without acknowledging her, he dropped his keys. Maya retrieved them in one fluid motion as she walked past, continuing toward the vehicle. She slid into the driver's seat while Miller created a distraction, calling out to another officer about paperwork that needed signing. Maya pulled out of the lot, keeping her speed steady and unremarkable. 2 blocks from the station, Miller appeared on a corner as planned. He jumped into the passenger seat, his face pale with the magnitude of what they were doing. They'll realize you're gone within minutes, he said, checking his watch. We need to get off the main roads. Maya navigated through back streets, her FBI training in evasive driving now serving a purpose she'd never anticipated. There's a roadblock ahead, Miller warned as they approached the town limits. Standard procedure for escapes. Maya veered onto a service road that ran parallel to the railroad tracks. Alternative route? Miller directed her through a network of farm access roads. They passed the roadblock by a margin of less than half a mile, but it was enough. Sirens wailed in the distance as Oakridge PD realized their prisoner had escaped. Where can we go? Maya asked. They'll check my apartment first thing. Miller nodded. I know a place. My mentor, Sergeant Washington, has a cabin about 20 miles from here. It's remote, defensible. Maya smiled at the coincidence of the shared surname. No relation, I assume? None. Miller confirmed as they abandoned the patrol car in a shopping center parking lot and transferred to his personal vehicle hidden behind a grocery store. The cabin was nestled in dense woods, accessible only by a narrow dirt road that would be difficult to approach undetected. Sergeant Washington greeted them with a shotgun in hand before recognizing Miller and lowering the weapon. You've started quite the firestorm, young man, he said, ushering them inside. Police radio is lit up like Christmas. Once inside, Maya finally contacted FBI Director Patterson directly. Sir, this is Washington. I've experienced a situation in Oakridge. She detailed the events clinically, professionally, despite the lingering anger and humiliation. Keller appears to be connected to the Dominguez operation. I believe my cover may have been compromised. Patterson's response was immediate and forceful. A tactical team is already en route. Maya. ETA 90 minutes. Are you secure until then? Yes, sir. I have 2 allies, Officer Brendan Miller and retired Sergeant James Washington. Stay put. And Maya? This isn't the first incident. We've had 3 other black agents report similar treatment in different jurisdictions over the past year. This stops now. Maya ended the call and turned to Miller and Washington. We need to prepare. When Keller realizes I've escaped with help, he'll come looking. And now we know he has a powerful motive beyond racism, protecting his connection to a drug trafficking organization. As they secured the perimeters of the cabin, Maya's mind turned to the larger pattern the director had mentioned. Other black agents, other jurisdictions. This wasn't isolated. It was systemic. And bringing down Richard Keller would be just the beginning of a much larger fight for justice. A fight she was now more determined than ever to win. The morning news cycle exploded with contradictory headlines about Maya's escape. Local station WOAK led with, Dangerous impersonator escapes police custody. While the regional NBC affiliate took a more measured approach, FBI agent claims wrongful arrest by Oakridge PD. Maya watched the coverage on Washington's small television, her expression impassive despite the fury building inside her. Keller had already held a hasty press conference, his uniform pressed and his manner somber, as he warned the public about a dangerous criminal claiming federal credentials, and promised swift recapture. The Oakridge police chief stood solidly behind him, along with Captain Ellis. Textbook damage control, Sergeant Washington commented, switching off the television. They're closing ranks. Miller's phone buzzed with a text message. It's from Sophia at the courthouse. Someone posted a video. He held up the screen, showing a social media post that was rapidly gaining traction. A teenage girl had recorded part of Maya's initial arrest from her bedroom window across the street. The grainy nighttime footage clearly showed Keller slamming Maya against the car, and the moment he discovered the planted evidence, pulling it from his own pocket before claiming to find it in the vehicle. The video didn't capture everything, but it was enough to cast serious doubt on Keller's version of events. That's going to complicate the narrative, Maya said, allowing herself a small smile of vindication. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., FBI Director Patterson was navigating political pressure from multiple directions. The Attorney General wanted the situation handled quietly to avoid interagency conflict. The Oakridge mayor had called demanding the FBI retract any suggestion of wrongdoing by his police department. Patterson had refused both requests, backing his agent completely. This isn't going away with a handshake and an apology, he told his deputy director. We're talking civil rights violations against a federal agent. I want the full weight of the Bureau behind this. Back at the cabin, Maya, Miller, and Washington compiled evidence methodically. Miller's recordings of Keller's conversations, the booking documents showing procedural violations, Maya's medical documentation of the injuries sustained during her arrest. Washington contributed his own historical knowledge. Keller and I have history, the retired sergeant revealed, spreading a folder of old internal affairs complaints on the table. 10 years ago, I filed a formal complaint against him when we both worked county patrol. He'd been stopping black motorists at 4 times the rate of white drivers. The complaint disappeared, and 3 weeks later, my locker was filled with racist threats. Miller's phone rang, a fellow officer from the department. Miller? Where are you, man? Keller's looking everywhere for you. Says you might be helping that FBI impersonator. Miller maintained his cover. Got called in to help my mom. She fell this morning. I'll be in for evening shift. He ended the call, looking worried. They're suspicious. Dispatch can track the GPS on my car. We should move it deeper into the woods. As Miller concealed his vehicle, Maya received an encrypted message from her FBI team. They'd established a perimeter around Oakridge and were awaiting further orders. She also learned that her parents, who lived in a suburb of Baltimore, had received a visit from local police asking about her whereabouts. Keller's reaching out to other departments, she told Washington grimly. Using law enforcement channels to harass my family. Standard intimidation tactic, Washington nodded. Sending a message that his reach extends beyond Oakridge. In town, the black community had begun organizing. The video of Maya's arrest had struck a nerve, confirming what many had experienced themselves. A spontaneous gathering outside the police station grew from dozens to hundreds by midday. Signs reading, "Justice for Agent Washington," and "End Police Racism," filled the square. The Oakridge police response was heavy-handed. Officers in riot gear, threats of arrest for unlawful assembly. Local news cameras captured it all. Meanwhile, Maya discovered another disturbing connection. Judge Hamilton signed the fraudulent search warrant for my vehicle, she told Miller, reviewing the documentation he'd smuggled out. The same judge who's dismissed every excessive force complaint against Keller for the past 5 years. Hamilton and Keller golfed together, Miller confirmed. They're part of the same country club crowd. Their strategy session was interrupted by the sound of a vehicle approaching on the cabin's access road. Miller peered through the blinds. It's Reynolds. My cruiser's GPS must have pinged before we disabled it. Washington grabbed his shotgun. Back door. Now. They slipped out as Officer Reynolds approached the front of the cabin. Maya circled behind, using the dense forest cover. She watched Reynolds check the cabin, then speak into his radio. Miller's vehicle confirmed at Washington's cabin. No visual on suspects yet. Requesting backup. Maya's heart sank. Their safe haven was compromised. As they retreated deeper into the woods, Reynolds spotted movement and pursued. The confrontation happened in a small clearing, Reynolds with his weapon drawn, facing Miller. Brendan, what the hell are you doing? Throwing away your career for some criminal? Reynolds demanded. She's not a criminal. She's FBI, Miller replied steadily. And Keller is dirty. You know it, Reynolds. You've seen the same things I have. Reynolds' weapon wavered slightly. You don't understand the position you're putting me in. I understand exactly, Miller countered. The same position I was in yesterday. The moment you have to decide what kind of cop you want to be. A long silence followed. Then, surprisingly, Reynolds lowered his weapon. Keller's been skimming from drug seizures for years. He admitted quietly. Half the narcotics that come into evidence disappear before they're logged. I've documented everything, but I've been too afraid to come forward. Maya stepped into the clearing. Officer Reynolds, I'm Special Agent Maya Washington. If you're willing to testify about what you've witnessed, the FBI can offer you protection. Reynolds holstered his weapon. There are others too. Officers who've kept silent out of fear. If you're building a case against Keller, I want in. 3 officers were now allied with Maya. A small resistance forming within the department. Maya contacted her undercover informant through secure channels. Confirming her suspicions, Keller had been protecting certain drug shipments in exchange for payment. The entire operation had been compromised. As FBI teams established surveillance positions around Oakridge, Maya received an urgent alert from Washington's cabin security system. Motion detectors triggered on the perimeter. Live video feed showed Keller leading 4 armed officers toward the property. He found us, Maya said, showing the others her phone screen. And he's not coming to make an arrest. He's coming to eliminate witnesses. The storm that had been building was about to break. And Richard Keller was bringing war to their doorstep. The forest fell silent as Keller and his team approached the cabin, weapons drawn in tactical formation. From their concealed position 200 yards away, Maya assessed the situation with professional detachment. 5 officers total. Keller, Peterson, Diaz, and 2 I don't recognize. Washington nodded grimly. The 2 on the flanks are Keller's hunting buddies. Part-time deputies from the next county. Not real cops, but they have badges. Maya formulated a plan quickly. Reynolds, circle back to your patrol car. Call dispatch, report gunshots at this location. We need witnesses and official response. As Reynolds disappeared into the trees, Maya turned to Miller. Your body cam. Is it operational? Miller nodded, tapping the device on his chest. Full battery, running since this morning. Good. Now we need to control the narrative. Using her FBI emergency protocols, Maya connected her phone to the Bureau's satellite network, establishing a secure video feed that would be recorded at headquarters. This ends today, but on our terms. The standoff began with Keller kicking in the cabin door, shouting for them to surrender. Finding the cabin empty, he ordered his team to spread out and search the surrounding woods. Maya waited until a news helicopter appeared overhead, responding to Reynolds' manufactured emergency, before stepping into a clearing, hands raised. Officer Keller, she called out, her voice carrying through the trees. This is Special Agent Maya Washington, FBI. You are interfering with a federal investigation and threatening a federal officer. Stand down immediately. Keller spun toward her voice, rifle raised. On the ground. Now! His face contorted with rage as he recognized her. Maya remained standing, hands visible, projecting calm authority despite the weapon aimed at her chest. There are witnesses now, Keller. News cameras overhead. FBI surveillance recording. Whatever happens here, there's no covering it up. The helicopter circled lower, its camera clearly capturing the scene unfolding below. Keller's expression flickered with uncertainty before hardening again. You've got nothing. It's your word against mine, and around here, my word is law. Is it? Maya countered, her voice carrying to the other officers. Officer Miller has documented your confession about the planted evidence. Officer Reynolds has records of your drug seizure skimming. We have the video of my arrest showing you planting evidence. It's over. Sergeant Washington stepped from the trees, shotgun pointed at the ground but ready. Richard, don't make this worse than it already is. There's no walking away from killing a federal agent. Keller's face twisted with naked hatred. You stay out of this, old man. You and your kind have been pushing too far, taking what isn't yours. Badges, positions, authority, none of it belongs to you. The racial animus behind his corruption emerged fully, his voice rising as he continued. 20 years I've served this community, keeping it safe from people like you. I decide who belongs here and who doesn't. The helicopter spotlight illuminated Keller's face as his bigotry poured forth, unaware that every word was being broadcast live across 3 counties. You think having FBI credentials changes what you are? You people always want special treatment, always playing the victim. Well, not in my jurisdiction. Maya recognized the psychological breakdown happening before her, Keller's carefully maintained facade crumbling under pressure, revealing the true poison beneath. She kept him talking, applying her FBI crisis negotiation training. This isn't about jurisdiction or authority, is it, Keller? It's about control. About maintaining a system where you decide who matters and who doesn't. Some of Keller's backup officers began to shift uncomfortably, the raw hatred in his tirade making them reconsider their positions. Officer Diaz lowered his weapon first, stepping back from Keller's side. I didn't sign up for this, Rich. A commotion at the edge of the clearing drew everyone's attention. A thin black man in his 20s approached, hands raised, accompanied by Reynolds. That's him, the young man shouted, pointing at Keller. That's the cop who told me to plant that stuff in the FBI lady's car. Said he'd drop my possession charge if I helped him. Anthony Mercer, Maya's confidential informant, had arrived with the crucial missing piece of evidence. Keller's face drained of color. He swung his rifle toward Mercer. You lying piece of... The movement was all Miller needed. He lunged at Keller, attempting to disarm him. In the struggle, the rifle discharged. Miller fell, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. Maya moved instantly, her FBI combat training taking over. She disarmed Keller with a precise strike, securing his weapon and forcing him to the ground with a restrained hold. Washington rushed to Miller's side, applying pressure to the wound. Stay with us, son. Help's coming. Maya maintained her hold on Keller while calling out to the other officers. He just shot one of your own. Are you still standing with him? The remaining officers lowered their weapons, the truth of the situation finally breaking through their loyalty to Keller. The distant thump of helicopter rotors announced the arrival of FBI tactical teams, rappelling into the clearing with precision and purpose. Director Patterson had authorized the full response. Keller, seeing his world collapsing, made one desperate move. Breaking free from Maya's hold, he grabbed Washington, pressing a concealed backup weapon to the retired sergeant's head. Back off, he screamed. Everyone back off or he dies. Maya faced him calmly, now holding Keller's rifle. There's nowhere to go, Richard. Look around you. Keller dragged Washington toward the tree-line. I'll kill him. I swear to God I'll do it. Washington, despite the gun at his temple, remained composed. You pulled that trigger, you're a cop killer. Is that how you want to be remembered? The momentary distraction was enough. Washington twisted suddenly, breaking Keller's grip and falling to the ground. Keller, now exposed, turned to flee into the dense forest. Maya pursued alone, ignoring calls from the FBI tactical team to let them handle it. This had become personal. For every black officer humiliated, for every minority citizen harassed, for every abuse of power justified by bigotry, she would see justice done. The chase led through darkness, Maya tracking Keller by sound and instinct. He had home field advantage, knowing these woods from hunting. She had FBI manhunt training and something more powerful, righteous determination. They emerged at a rocky outcropping above a steep ravine. Keller stood at the edge, weapons still in hand, nowhere left to run. Stay back, he warned, the gun now pointed at his own head. I'm not going to prison. You know what they do to cops inside. Maya approached slowly, her own weapon lowered. This isn't how it ends, Keller. Not with more violence. Easy for you to say, he spat. Your career will soar after this. The heroic black FBI agent who brought down the racist cop. They'll probably make a movie about you. This isn't about me, Maya replied, continuing her measured approach. It's about every person who faced injustice wearing a badge as an excuse. It's about accountability. Accountability? Keller laughed bitterly. Where's the accountability for cities turning into war zones? For drugs flooding our streets? Someone had to take control, maintain order. By becoming the very thing you claim to fight? Maya was close enough now to see the tears of rage on his face. By betraying your oath? That's not order, Keller. That's tyranny. His hand trembled on the gun. You don't understand. You can't understand. I understand better than you think, Maya said softly. I understand fear. Fear of change, fear of losing status. Fear of a world where your skin color doesn't automatically grant authority. But fear is a choice, Keller. And so is hate. The moment stretched between them, the gun wavering in Keller's grip. Then, surprisingly, he lowered the weapon. I'm not giving you the satisfaction of a suicide, he said finally. And I'm not dying for this town. As Maya secured his surrender, she realized the damage was far from over. Keller was in custody, but the system that had protected him remained largely intact. The real fight was just beginning. Do you believe Officer Keller's racism was the root cause of his corruption, or was it just a symptom of a larger power problem? Comment number 1 if you think racism drove his actions. Or number 2 if you think it was more about maintaining control and power. Like and subscribe if you believe accountability is essential for those who abuse their authority. What do you think will happen to the other officers who enabled Keller's behavior? And will the system that protected him for so long finally be reformed? Let's find out as our story continues. 2 days after Keller's arrest, the Oakridge Police Department found itself under siege, not from protesters, though they remained a constant presence outside, but from a joint task force of FBI agents and Department of Justice investigators who had descended on the small station. The conference room had been commandeered as an interview space, with officers being cycled through one by one. Maya sat across from Internal Affairs investigator Victor Ramirez, who had been brought in from the state capitol to ensure impartiality. His expression remained skeptical as he reviewed her statement. So you're alleging that Officer Keller not only falsely arrested you but was involved in narcotics trafficking? Ramirez's tone suggested he found the claim far-fetched. Maya pushed a folder across the table. Not alleging. Proving. That folder contains Officer Miller's sworn testimony, audio recordings of Keller discussing evidence tampering, and financial records showing unexplained cash deposits to Keller's offshore account following major drug seizures. Ramirez flipped through the documents, his expression gradually shifting from doubt to concern. This goes beyond one bad officer, he admitted finally. This level of corruption requires institutional protection. Exactly, Maya affirmed. That's why I've requested the investigation include Captain Ellis, Judge Hamilton, and District Attorney Pearson, all of whom helped suppress complaints against Keller. As Ramirez departed with the evidence, Captain Ellis approached Maya in the hallway. His earlier arrogance had evaporated, replaced by nervous calculation. "Agent Washington, I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot." Maya remained silent, waiting. Ellis lowered his voice. "Look, Keller went rogue. None of us knew about his drug connections. If I cooperate fully, testify against him, perhaps we could discuss limiting the scope of this investigation?" "Are you offering to make a deal, Captain?" Maya's voice was ice. "Because that sounds remarkably like attempting to obstruct justice, again." Ellis backpedaled quickly. No. Just trying to help get to the truth. Keller manipulated all of us." "Save it for your deposition," Maya replied, walking away. The FBI forensic team had taken over the evidence room, meticulously reviewing every case Keller had handled over the past 5 years. The pattern was unmistakable: drugs mysteriously disappearing, evidence contaminated, chain of custody broken in cases involving certain dealers while their competitors were aggressively prosecuted. It painted a picture not just of racism but of systematic corruption designed to control the local drug trade rather than eliminate it. Late that afternoon, Maya visited Oakridge Memorial Hospital where Officer Miller was recovering from surgery to remove the bullet from his shoulder. He looked pale but determined. "The doctors say I'll make a full recovery," he told her as she placed a small potted plant on his bedside table. "Might even be back on duty in a few weeks." Maya sat beside his bed. "About that. The Bureau has an opening in our Civil Rights Division. We need agents with your courage and integrity. Think about it." Miller's eyes widened. "Me? In the FBI? The application process is rigorous, but you've already demonstrated the most important qualification: moral courage under pressure." Their conversation was interrupted by Officer Reynolds, who arrived with several other officers Maya recognized from the department. All had come forward with testimonies against Keller. "We should have spoken up sooner," Reynolds admitted. But Keller made examples of anyone who challenged him. The last officer who filed a complaint was found with planted drugs in his locker, lost his job, his pension, everything. Maya understood the fear that had silenced them. "What matters is that you're speaking up now." As the investigation expanded, Maya conducted community meetings in Oakridge's predominantly black neighborhood. The church basement was packed with residents eager to share their experiences. "My son was arrested 3 times by Keller," an elderly woman testified. Each time for matching a description that somehow always fit any young black man in a 2-mile radius. A middle-aged man stood next. "I filed a complaint when Keller broke my taillight, then cited me for it. The complaint disappeared, and the next day, my business was raided for licensing violations." Story after story built a damning picture of systematic harassment and intimidation. Maya recorded each account, promising action. "This isn't just about punishing Keller," she told the gathering. "It's about changing the system that protected him." Between community meetings and formal depositions, Maya helped the FBI build connections between Keller's racial targeting and his drug operation. The victims had been carefully selected, people less likely to be believed if they reported misconduct, people with minor records or limited resources to fight back. Meanwhile, judges and prosecutors had looked the other way, sometimes out of shared prejudice, sometimes from political pressure, sometimes from simple convenience. The pattern revealed an uncomfortable truth: Keller's racism hadn't been an impediment to his corruption but a tool that facilitated it. The investigation hit a serious obstacle when key witness Anthony Mercer, who had testified about Keller asking him to plant evidence, missed a scheduled interview. FBI agents found his apartment empty, with signs of a hasty departure. Hours later, Maya received a troubling call. "Agent Washington? This is Officer Davies from Baltimore PD. We've got a John Doe who had your card in his pocket." Male, African American, mid-20s, gunshot wound to the head. Found in an alley behind the bus station. Maya's blood ran cold. I'm on my way. The victim was indeed Anthony Mercer, executed with a single shot that screamed professional hit. His death was staged to look like suicide. But the forensics told a different story. Keller might be in custody, but his network was still operational and eliminating witnesses. The threat against Maya's family intensified. Her parents' home was vandalized with racial slurs spray-painted across the garage door. Death threats arrived in their mailbox. FBI Director Patterson assigned a protection detail. But the psychological toll was mounting. Sergeant Washington organized a community response, neighbors taking shifts watching the house, local veterans providing security expertise, church groups delivering meals and support. The solidarity was moving, but Maya knew the danger remained very real. As she drove back to Oakridge from the Baltimore morgue, Maya received a call from Director Patterson. Maya, the mayor is trying to pressure us to limit the investigation scope. Says it's damaging community relations. She laughed without humor. Whose community? Certainly not the one Keller terrorized for years. Exactly my response, Patterson agreed. This goes forward, full scope. But watch yourself. When powerful people get desperate, the danger increases. The warning proved prescient. That evening, Maya arrived at her temporary office to find a file on her desk that hadn't been there before. Inside was evidence linking Mayor Wilson directly to Keller's protection racket, signatures authorizing irregular departmental fund transfers, calendar entries showing meetings with known drug distributors. But as Maya examined the documents more closely, she noticed subtle inconsistencies. The metadata showed recent creation dates. Someone was trying to divert the investigation, possibly setting up false leads. The trap became clear the next morning when she found Sarah Jenkins, the department's evidence technician, dead in her car behind the station, an apparent suicide with a note confessing to evidence tampering. The staging was almost perfect, except for one detail: Jenkins was left-handed. But the gun was found in her right hand. Another witness silenced, another death meant to derail the investigation. The pattern of obstruction and witness intimidation confirmed what Maya had suspected. Keller was not an anomaly but a symptom of corruption that infected every level of Oakridge's power structure. And as she prepared for the preliminary hearing, Maya knew that bringing down this system would require more than just evidence. It would require breaking through walls of denial and privilege that had stood for generations. The Oakridge County Courthouse stood imposing against the morning sky. Its classical columns and stone steps designed to intimidate those seeking justice within its walls. Television news vans lined the street, satellite dishes pointed skyward, broadcasting the day's proceedings to a national audience. What had begun as a local story of police misconduct had exploded into a national conversation about race, power, and accountability in law enforcement. Maya arrived early, accompanied by the FBI legal team. She wore a crisp navy suit, her posture straight, her expression composed despite the gravity of the day ahead. This preliminary hearing would determine whether sufficient evidence existed to proceed with a full trial against Keller and his co-conspirators. The stakes couldn't be higher. Inside the courtroom, Maya was surprised to see familiar faces from the community filling the public seating area. Sergeant Washington nodded to her from the back row. Miller, his arms still in a sling, sat near the front. Even more surprising were the officers from Oakridge PD who had come, Reynolds, Diaz, and others who had ultimately chosen truth over solidarity with corruption. Assistant U.S. Attorney Caroline Bennett approached Maya before proceedings began. "We're well prepared," she assured Maya, "but be ready for aggressive questioning. Keller's defense team will try to make this about you rather than his actions." Maya nodded. "I expected nothing less." The bailiff called the court to order as Judge Rebecca Martinez entered. Martinez, brought in from the federal district court to ensure impartiality, had a reputation for strict adherence to constitutional principles. Keller was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands and feet shackled. The man who had once strutted with such authority now appeared diminished, though the hatred in his eyes when he glanced at Maya remained undiminished. The proceedings began with the prosecution outlining the charges: civil rights violations, evidence tampering, conspiracy to distribute narcotics, witness intimidation, attempted murder. As Bennett methodically presented the evidence, Maya noticed several unexpected faces enter the courtroom. Community members who had shared their stories of mistreatment at Keller's hands. They had come to witness this moment of reckoning. Bennett called Maya as the first witness. After establishing her credentials and experience, Bennett asked her to recount the night of her arrest. Maya testified clearly and precisely, describing each violation of procedure, each racial slur, each moment where her rights had been deliberately ignored. When she finished, Bennett asked, "Agent Washington, in your professional assessment, were Officer Keller's actions that night consistent with proper police procedure?" "They were not," Maya answered firmly. "They violated departmental policy, state law, and constitutional protections." Keller's defense attorney, James Whitfield, rose for cross-examination. Tall and imposing in an expensive suit, he approached with a smile that never reached his eyes. "Agent Washington, isn't it true that you have a history of making racially charged accusations against fellow law enforcement officers?" Maya remained calm. "No, that is not true." "Really?" Whitfield produced a folder. "Because I have here a complaint you filed 3 years ago against a DA agent, claiming racial bias during a joint operation." "I filed a procedural complaint regarding violation of jurisdictional protocols," Maya corrected. "The agent's race was never mentioned because it wasn't relevant to the professional lapse." Whitfield pivoted. "Isn't it possible that Officer Keller's actions were motivated by legitimate suspicion rather than racial animus? After all, you were driving through a high-crime area at 2 in the morning." Maya's response was measured but firm. Officer Keller's own recorded words contradict that suggestion. He explicitly referenced my race multiple times while violating standard procedures. The questioning grew increasingly hostile. "Agent Washington, would you describe yourself as an activist?" "I would describe myself as an FBI agent sworn to uphold the Constitution." Maya replied evenly. "If believing in equal application of the law makes me an activist, then yes." Whitfield attempted to introduce Maya's college attendance at Black student union meetings as evidence of anti-police bias, but Judge Martinez shut down this line of questioning as irrelevant. After Maya's testimony, Bennett called Miller to the stand. Still recovering from his wound, he testified with quiet dignity about what he had witnessed and the moral crisis that had led him to help Maya. "I took an oath to protect and serve," Miller explained. "Not to protect corrupt officers and serve personal prejudices." Whitfield's cross-examination of Miller was brutal, suggesting career jealousy and romantic interest in Maya as motivations for his betrayal of a fellow officer. Miller never took the bait, responding with simple truth to each insinuation. The most dramatic moment came when Bennett called retired Officer Jackson, Keller's former partner from 6 years earlier. Jackson, a 30-year veteran who had remained silent until now, detailed a pattern of misconduct dating back to Keller's earliest days on the force. He called it street justice, Jackson testified. Roughing up black suspects, planting evidence on those he decided were guilty regardless of facts, using racial slurs in private among officers he trusted. "And why didn't you report these violations?" Bennett asked. Jackson's face showed deep shame. Fear at first, then complicity. "I told myself I was just doing my job, following orders. I've lived with that failure every day since." Other witnesses followed, community members describing harassment, forensic experts confirming evidence tampering, financial investigators tracking the money from drug operations to Keller's hidden accounts. The courtroom fell completely silent when Anthony Mercer's recorded testimony was played. His voice from beyond the grave detailing how Keller had coerced him into planting evidence in Maya's car. The final confrontation came when Keller himself took the stand. Against his attorney's advice. His testimony began with rehearsed denials, claiming Maya had resisted arrest and that all actions had been by the book. But under Bennett's skillful cross-examination, Keller's facade began to crack. "Officer Keller, do you recognize this voice recording?" Bennett played the clip from Miller's hidden recorder, Keller's voice clearly saying, "These people need to be taught their place, badge or no badge." "That's taken out of context," Keller insisted, his face flushing. "What exactly is the proper context for that statement?" "Officer Keller?" Bennett pressed. "What did you mean by these people?" "I meant criminals. People who don't respect the law." "Then why specify badge or no badge? Weren't you specifically referring to Agent Washington's race, not her behavior?" The questioning continued relentlessly, pushing Keller toward the breaking point. When Bennett introduced evidence of his offshore accounts and connections to the drug trade, Keller's control finally shattered. "You have no idea what it takes to keep order," he shouted, rising from his seat. "While you all play by rules and regulations, the animals take over our streets. Someone has to do whatever it takes." The racial animus underlying his worldview poured forth in an uncontrolled tirade that left the courtroom in shocked silence. Judge Martinez called for order as Keller was restrained by court officers. "The witness will control himself or be removed," she warned. But the damage was done. Keller's mask had fallen completely, revealing the prejudice that had driven his corruption. After final arguments, Judge Martinez delivered her ruling. Based on the evidence presented, this court finds probable cause to proceed with all charges against the defendant. Additionally, I am referring Captain Ellis, Judge Hamilton, and 3 other named individuals for investigation based on evidence of conspiracy and obstruction of justice. She set Keller's bail at $2 million, effectively ensuring he would remain in custody until trial. As the courtroom emptied, Maya found herself surrounded by community members offering thanks and support. An elderly woman gripped her hand tightly. "My grandson was put away on Keller's false testimony. Now there's hope for justice." This, Maya realized, was why she had joined the FBI, not for power or authority, but for moments like this, when the system, however imperfectly, bent toward justice. The fight was far from over. The trial would be grueling. The resistance from entrenched interests would intensify. But today, in this courtroom, a message had been sent that would resonate far beyond Oakridge. No badge could shield corruption forever. No power was absolute. And no one, not even those sworn to uphold the law, was above it. 6 months later, Maya stood in Director Patterson's office in FBI headquarters, Washington, D.C. The morning sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating the commendation certificate in her hands. "For extraordinary courage and dedication to justice in the face of corruption and discrimination," Patterson read aloud, his voice carrying pride. "Agent Washington, your actions in Oakridge have changed not just one department, but initiated reforms across multiple jurisdictions." Maya accepted the honor with characteristic humility. "I was just doing my job, sir." "We both know it was far more than that," Patterson replied. "You've created a template for addressing systemic issues in law enforcement that we're implementing nationwide." After the ceremony, Maya met Brendan Miller in the building's lobby. No longer wearing a police uniform, Miller was dressed in a dark suit with an FBI trainee badge clipped to his lapel. His shoulder had healed completely, leaving only a small scar as reminder of that night in the forest. "How does it feel to be on the other side of the training?" Maya asked as they walked toward the cafeteria. "Challenging," Miller admitted with a smile. "The academy is everything you warned me it would be. But I've never been more certain about a decision." Their conversation turned to the outcomes of the Oakridge case. Richard Keller had been sentenced to 25 years in federal prison after being convicted on all counts. The trial had revealed the full extent of his criminal enterprise, not just racial targeting and evidence planting, but a years-long operation protecting certain drug traffickers while eliminating their competition. Captain Ellis had received 15 years for his role in the conspiracy. Judge Hamilton had been removed from the bench and disbarred. 7 other officers faced various sentences for their involvement. But beyond the individual punishments, the case had triggered structural changes. The Oakridge Police Department had been placed under federal consent decree, with mandatory reforms in training, oversight, and accountability. Body cameras were now required for all officers, with footage automatically uploaded to servers beyond local control. Sergeant Washington had been appointed to lead the new Civilian Oversight Committee, bringing decades of experience to the vital role of community bridge building. The most meaningful changes, however, were happening at the community level. Maya had returned to Oakridge regularly over the past 6 months, working with both the reformed police department and local residents to heal the deep wounds of distrust. Today was particularly significant. She would be attending the release of Marcus Johnson, the first of 17 people wrongfully convicted based on Keller's falsified evidence. Outside the county jail, a small crowd gathered to welcome Johnson home. At 45, he had lost 5 years of his life to a drug conviction based entirely on Keller's testimony and planted evidence. When Johnson emerged, his mother rushed forward to embrace him, tears streaming down her face. Maya stood back, allowing the family their moment before approaching. "Mr. Johnson," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Agent Washington." Recognition dawned in his eyes. "The FBI lady who brought down Keller. Man, in prison you were like a folk hero. The one who finally made them pay attention." Johnson's case wasn't unique. A comprehensive review of Keller's arrests had identified dozens of cases tainted by misconduct, resulting in overturned convictions and released inmates. Each case represented a life derailed by corruption justified through racial prejudice. Later that afternoon, Maya attended a community healing initiative at Oakridge's largest Baptist church. The event brought together police officers and residents for honest dialogue about rebuilding trust. Officer Reynolds, now promoted to training supervisor, spoke about the department's new approach to community engagement. "We're learning to be guardians, not warriors," he explained. "To see the people we serve as neighbors, not suspects." The following day, Maya addressed a class of recruits at the police academy, her presentation focusing on implicit bias and constitutional policing. "The badge is not a shield from accountability," she told the attentive cadets. "It's a symbol of the higher standard to which you must hold yourselves." Among the recruits were faces of all colors, the class more diverse than any before it, another positive change emerging from the scandal's aftermath. The most difficult meeting came later that week when Maya visited the federal correctional facility where Keller was serving his sentence. She had requested the meeting against the advice of colleagues who felt she had nothing to gain from the encounter. Keller was brought to the visitor's room in shackles, the orange jumpsuit hanging loosely on his frame. Prison had aged him, the arrogance in his bearing diminished, but not entirely gone. "Agent Washington," he acknowledged, his voice flat. "To what do I owe this honor?" "I wanted to see if you understand yet," Maya replied simply. "Understand what? That the system turned on one of its own to appease the mob?" His bitterness remained intact. "That actions have consequences. That the harm you caused was real." Keller's laugh was hollow. "You think this is some movie moment where I see the error of my ways? Confess my sins? Beg forgiveness?" "No," Maya answered. "I don't expect redemption from you, Keller. I just wanted confirmation." "Of what?" "That justice was done. That despite your badge and your connections and your privilege, the truth eventually won." Something flickered in Keller's eyes, not remorse, perhaps, but recognition of his complete defeat. "You've taken everything from me." "No," Maya corrected him. "You sacrificed everything, your oath, your honor, your freedom, for hatred and greed. The only person who destroyed Richard Keller was Richard Keller." She stood to leave, having seen what she came for. Keller called after her, It won't last, you know. These reforms, this awakening, it'll fade once the headlines move on. The system always reverts. Maya turned back one last time. Maybe in the past. But we're building something different now. And even if it's imperfect, it's still progress. A week later, Maya received news of her promotion to lead the FBI's new task force on police accountability. A unit specifically designed to investigate patterns of civil rights violations in law enforcement nationwide. The Oakridge case had demonstrated the need for specialized expertise in addressing systemic misconduct. The task force would combine investigation, training, and policy development to drive reform across jurisdictions. At the national conference announcing the initiative, Maya presented the Oakridge case as both warning and roadmap. What happened there wasn't unique, she told the audience of law enforcement leaders and civil rights advocates. What was unique was the response, a commitment to fundamental change rather than cosmetic fixes. As reporters asked questions afterward, one raised the issue that had followed the case from the beginning: Agent Washington. Critics suggest that focusing on racist officers distracts from broader problems in policing. How do you respond? Maya considered her answer carefully. Racism wasn't separate from the other problems in Oakridge, it was the tool that enabled them. It's what allowed Keller to target victims who wouldn't be believed, to convince colleagues to look the other way, to justify violations as necessary for public safety. Addressing bias isn't a distraction from police reform, it's an essential component of it. The press conference concluded with the announcement of new federal guidelines for police departments nationwide, many based directly on lessons from Oakridge. The final event of this momentous week was perhaps the most meaningful, a memorial service for Anthony Mercer and the other victims who hadn't lived to see justice done. Maya delivered a powerful speech honoring their courage and sacrifice. True change requires truth-tellers, she told the gathered mourners. People willing to stand against power at great personal risk. Their lives mattered. Their truth mattered. And because of them, our justice system moves one step closer to its highest ideals. 3 days later, Maya responded to a minor traffic accident while visiting her parents in Baltimore. As she pulled over to offer assistance, she came face to face with a young patrol officer securing the scene. The name on his uniform stopped her cold: Officer Thomas Keller. Richard Keller's son. The moment stretched between them, tension crackling in the air. The younger Keller clearly recognized her, his expression guarded. What would he do? Carry his father's grudge? Continue the cycle of hatred? Then, surprisingly, Officer Thomas Keller extended his hand. Agent Washington, I've heard a lot about you. His voice carried no hostility, only professional respect. Only some of it's true, Maya replied, accepting the handshake. The interaction was brief, professional, but symbolic of possibilities. As Maya drove away, she reflected on the uncertain but hopeful path ahead. Systems didn't change overnight. Prejudice didn't disappear with one case or one conviction. Justice was never perfect or complete. But today, in that simple handshake between the son of a corrupt officer and the agent who had exposed him, she had glimpsed what progress looked like. And for now, that was enough. What do you think about the resolution of this story? Do you believe real-world police departments can undergo the kind of transformation that happened in Oakridge? Comment below with your thoughts on justice and accountability in law enforcement. If you found Maya's story powerful, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who care about these important issues. Thank you for joining me on this journey through darkness into hope. And remember that the fight for justice is never finished. It requires vigilance and courage from all of us. This story powerfully illustrates that true justice requires both individual courage and systemic change. Maya Washington demonstrated that standing against corruption often means facing isolation, danger, and personal sacrifice. Yet her determination reminds us that single voices, when backed by unwavering principle, can catalyze transformation. Officer Miller proved that moral courage means choosing right over comfortable, even when surrounded by pressure to remain silent. The case highlights how racism often functions as a tool enabling broader corruption, allowing perpetrators to target victims less likely to be believed and to justify constitutional violations as any. Accessory 4. Public safety. We see that accountability isn't just about punishing bad actors but creating systems where misconduct cannot thrive undetected. Perhaps most importantly, this story teaches us that justice isn't a destination but an ongoing commitment. The work doesn't end with one conviction or policy change. Real progress requires continuous vigilance, institutional reform, and the courage to confront uncomfortable truths about power and privilege in our society. Each of us, like Maya, must decide what we stand for when faced with injustice. What moments in this story resonated most with you? Have you ever witnessed someone standing up against injustice like Maya or Officer Miller did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of courage against corruption moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories of justice and accountability. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that one person's brave stand can create ripples of change throughout an entire system. Thank you for joining me on this journey through darkness into hope. Together, we can build a world where justice truly applies to everyone, regardless of badge or background.